Have you ever looked at someone you thought you knew, someone you grew up with, shared secrets with, and realized they've become a complete stranger? That moment when the person you trusted most in the world transforms into your worst nightmare? I'm sitting here in my new kitchen, thousands of miles from the home where I grew up, watching my son play with his blocks on the floor, and I still can't believe everything that happened. His sweet giggles fill the room, and I have to remind myself that we're safe now, that the nightmare is behind us, even though some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, racing to check his crib. It started 18 months ago, though looking back, maybe the signs were there much earlier. My sister Emma and I had always been close, the kind of sisters who finished each other's sentences and shared clothes without asking. She was 3 years older than me, always the protective big sister who stood up for me on the playground and helped me with my homework. When she got married at 25 to David, a sweet guy from her college economics class, I was her maid of honor, crying happy tears as she walked down the aisle in our grandmother's pearl necklace. Emma had always dreamed of being a mother. Even as kids, she was the one who carefully arranged her baby dolls in perfect rows, changing their outfits and singing them lullabies. She had names picked out before she even met David, had a Pinterest board full of nursery ideas, and talked about how she couldn't wait to experience pregnancy, to feel a life growing inside her. So when she announced at a family dinner that she was 7 months pregnant with her miracle baby, we were all overjoyed. She'd been trying for 3 years, had gone through 2 rounds of IVF, and finally, her dream was coming true. I'll never forget the night. Everything changed. Emma had gone out with some college friends for what was supposed to be a quiet dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. She was glowing, her belly round and perfect under a flowing maternity dress I'd helped her pick out just the week before. She texted me a picture from the restaurant bathroom, cradling her bump with both hands, captioned with, "Can't wait for you to meet your nephew, Auntie Sarah." That was the last normal moment of her life. The next morning, I got a call that shattered our entire family. Emma had woken up in a hospital room with a flat stomach, bruising in places that made my stomach turn, and dried blood on her thighs. Someone had drugged her drink at the restaurant, and during the 12 hours, she was unconscious. They had done the unthinkable. The baby was gone. Not miscarried, not stillborn, but taken from her body in some makeshift procedure that left her unable to ever carry another child. The man responsible was someone she'd considered a friend, someone who'd been at their wedding, someone we'd all trusted. Marcus got off with a suspended sentence, some legal technicality about evidence and consent that I still don't understand. The justice system failed my sister, and watching her sit in that courtroom as he walked free broke something inside all of us. But it broke Emma most of all. The sister I knew disappeared that day. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped living. She'd sit in the nursery she'd so carefully prepared, holding the tiny onesies she'd washed and folded with such hope, talking to a baby who would never come home. David tried everything to help her heal. Therapy, support groups, even a trip to Europe to get away from the memories. Nothing worked. She insisted her baby boy, who she'd named Joshua, was still out there somewhere, that she could feel him waiting for her. Their marriage couldn't survive the weight of that grief. David loved her, but he couldn't reach her anymore. She'd call him by Marcus's name in her sleep, reliving that night over and over. She'd accuse him of not looking hard enough for Joshua, of giving up on their son. The day he moved out, Emma didn't even seem to notice. She was too busy redecorating the nursery, convinced Joshua would need it when he came home. I tried to be there for her, I really did. I'd bring her groceries, sit with her while she organized and reorganized baby clothes, listen to her theories about where Joshua might be. My parents threw themselves into caring for her, enabling her delusions because they didn't know what else to do. Mom would nod along when Emma talked about Joshua's first day of kindergarten, how he'd need new school supplies soon. Dad fixed up the old swing set in their backyard because Emma insisted Joshua would want to play on it. When I found out I was pregnant, my first thought wasn't joy. It was fear. Fear of how Emma would react, fear of hurting her more than she'd already been hurt. My husband Mike and I had been trying for a year, and the timing felt so cruel. How could I celebrate my pregnancy when my sister had lost hers in such a horrific way? I waited until I was showing to tell the family. We invited everyone over for Sunday dinner, and I wore a loose sweater despite the warm weather. Emma arrived early like she always did, helping Mom in the kitchen and chatting about Joshua's imaginary milestones. When I finally announced the news, the room went silent. Mom's face cycled through joy and terror. Dad reached for his beer with shaking hands. And Emma just stared at my belly with an expression I'd never seen before. Then she smiled, this bright, brilliant smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Oh, Sarah, how wonderful! Joshua is coming back to us." The room stayed frozen as she rushed over to touch my stomach, whispering, "I knew you'd find your way back to Mama, sweet boy. I knew you wouldn't leave me forever." I tried to gently correct her, to explain that this was my baby, not Joshua, but she wouldn't hear it. In her mind, her 7-month pregnancy had somehow transferred to me. Her baby boy was growing in my womb, and I was just the vessel bringing him back to her. Mike tried to intervene, but Mom pulled him aside, begging him to just let Emma have this moment, that maybe it would help her heal. But it didn't help her heal. It made everything so much worse. Emma became my shadow during the pregnancy. She'd show up at my prenatal appointments, introducing herself as the mother to confused nurses. She'd buy baby clothes and furniture, having them delivered to her house instead of mine. She created social media accounts announcing Joshua's return and posted ultrasound photos she'd somehow gotten copies of from my doctor's office. When I tried to set boundaries, she'd cry to our parents about how cruel I was being, keeping her from her baby. My parents, lost in their own guilt and grief over what had happened to Emma, took her side more often than not. They'd tell me I was being selfish, that it wasn't hurting anyone to let Emma be involved. Mom would secretly give Emma copies of ultrasound photos, tell her what we discussed at appointments Emma wasn't invited to. Dad started calling my baby the little guy instead of using the name Mike and I had chosen, because Emma insisted his name was Joshua. The baby shower was a disaster. I'd specifically asked Mom not to invite Emma, knowing it would be too painful for her, but she showed up anyway, with a car full of gifts all labeled "for Joshua" from Mama. She gave a speech about how long she'd waited for this moment, how grateful she was that I'd kept her baby safe. My friends sat in stunned silence as she described picking me as the perfect surrogate, how she'd known I'd take good care of her son until he could come home. Mike lost his temper that day. He stood up in the middle of her speech and told her to leave, that this was our child, not hers. Emma just smiled that empty smile and said, "You'll understand when he's born. He'll know his real mother's voice. He's been listening for it all along." The last month of pregnancy was exhausting, not just physically, but emotionally. Emma would park outside our house at night, and I'd see her car through the bedroom window. She'd sit there for hours, sometimes singing lullabies loud enough for us to hear. We called the police, but they said she wasn't breaking any laws by parking on a public street. We installed security cameras, changed our locks, even considered moving, but I was too pregnant to handle the stress of relocation. Labor started on a rainy Tuesday morning. Mike called his parents to watch our daughter Lily, who was 6 and didn't understand why Aunt Emma had been acting so strange. We'd tried to shield her from the worst of it, but she'd noticed Emma calling her Joshua's big sister and asked why her aunt kept getting her brother's name wrong. We didn't tell anyone I was in labor, especially not my family, but somehow Emma knew. She arrived at the hospital 3 hours after we did, carrying a folder full of documents. She'd forged surrogacy papers, claiming I'd agreed to carry her child. She had fake contracts, falsified medical records showing her as the biological mother. even a counterfeit court order granting her custody. The hospital staff was confused but professional. They couldn't just hand over a baby based on questionable paperwork, but Emma's performance was convincing. She knew details about my pregnancy that only someone close would know. She cried real tears as she described losing her first baby, how I'd offered to help her have another chance at motherhood. She even had my parents there to back up her story, both of them insisting that yes, this had been the plan all along. I was in active labor, in tremendous pain, and trying to convince strangers that my own sister was lying. Mike was frantic, showing our marriage certificate, insurance papers, anything to prove this was our baby. But Emma had an answer for everything. We were still married. Yes, but I'd agreed to be her surrogate using her frozen embryos. The insurance was in my name for medical purposes, but she'd been paying all the bills. When our son was finally born, the most beautiful moment of my life was instantly shattered. The nurse placed him on my chest and Emma lunged forward, trying to physically take him from my arms. She was screaming that he was Joshua, that he knew her voice, that I was stealing her baby. Security had to restrain her while she sobbed and reached for my newborn son. The next few days were a nightmare. Hospital security kept Emma out of the maternity ward, but she set up camp in the lobby. She'd brought a breast pump and was telling anyone who'd listen that she needed to feed her baby, that we were starving him by keeping him from his mother. She posted constantly on social media, sharing photos from the nursery she'd prepared, telling the story of how her surrogate sister had stolen her child. My parents visited once, and it was horrible. Mom held my son with tears in her eyes, but she called him Joshua the entire time. When I corrected her, she said, "Whatever you want to call him is fine, sweetie, but Emma will always know him as Joshua." Dad barely looked at me, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation, but unwilling to stand up to Mom or Emma. When we finally got to take our son home, we had a police escort. Emma followed us, running red lights to keep up, screaming out her car window that we were kidnapping her baby. The officers warned her about her driving, but said they couldn't arrest her for following us on public roads. We were on our own. The first week home was when Emma really escalated. She called CPS, claiming Mike was abusing both me and the baby. She had our mom call too, expressing concerns about our fitness as parents. When the social worker showed up for the mandatory home visit, Emma was right behind her with our parents in tow. Emma had given herself a black eye with makeup, claiming Mike had hit her when she'd tried to visit her baby. She'd coached our parents on what to say, how to express worry without making outright accusations. The social worker, a kind woman named Janet, saw through a lot of it, but she still had to follow protocol. She had to investigate the claims. The investigation was hell. They interviewed us separately, examined our home, even had to check our son for signs of abuse. During this time, Emma petitioned for emergency custody, using the open CPS case as evidence we were unfit parents. The judge, thankfully, saw through her lies and denied the petition. But it took 2 weeks of legal battles while we were trying to care for a newborn and shield Lily from the chaos. Those 2 weeks almost broke us. Mike had to take time off work to deal with the legal issues. Lily was having nightmares about someone taking her baby brother away. I was trying to breastfeed while stressed beyond belief, barely producing enough milk to keep our son fed. And through it all, Emma kept escalating. She'd leave gifts on our doorstep, all addressed to Joshua. She'd call dozens of times a day from different numbers, leaving voicemails about how Joshua needed his real mother. She created website after website telling her story, posting the photos she'd stolen, building a following of people who believed her version of events. Some of them started harassing us too, leaving comments on any social media posts saying we were baby thieves. When the CPS investigation finally cleared us, we thought we could breathe again, but Emma had just been planning her next move. She'd spent those 2 weeks studying our routines through the security cameras we didn't know she'd hacked. She knew when we slept deepest, when Mike left for work, when I took my shower while the baby napped. She still had the spare key I'd given her years ago, back when she was just my sister and not a threat to my family. One night, she used it. I woke up to check on the baby around 5 a.m., that internal mother's clock that never quite lets you sleep deeply. His crib was empty. For a moment, my sleep-deprived brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The blanket was still there, the pacifier on the mattress, but no baby. Then I heard it. Coming from downstairs, a soft humming, Emma's voice singing a lullaby. The terror I felt in that moment is indescribable. I crept down the stairs, trying not to make noise, trying not to startle her into running with my baby. I found her in the living room, sitting in my nursing chair, holding my son and trying to get him to latch onto her breast. She'd changed him into clothes she'd brought, little blue pajamas with Joshua embroidered on them. She looked up at me with such joy on her face. "He remembers me," she whispered. "Feel how he calms when I hold him? He knows I'm his mama." My son was actually crying, squirming in her arms, clearly distressed. But Emma couldn't see that. In her mind, he was finally home. I managed to stay calm enough to call 911 while Mike kept Emma talking. She genuinely didn't understand why we were upset. In her mind, she'd simply come to take care of her baby who was crying for her. She told the police officers that she had every right to be there, that we'd been the ones keeping her child from her. Even as they put her in handcuffs, she kept insisting they were making a mistake. We got a restraining order, but it felt like a piece of paper against a hurricane. Emma's delusions were too strong, her belief too absolute. She was released on bail within 24 hours and immediately went back to stalking us. She'd stay the legal distance away, but somehow always be there. At the grocery store, at the park, at Lily's school pickup. The breaking point came when Emma successfully took our son. She'd been planning it for months, we learned later. She'd rented an apartment 2 states away under a fake name, told the neighbors she was getting her baby back from an unfit relative. She'd forged an entire identity for Joshua, complete with medical records and daycare enrollment. She'd even joined mom groups in that area, sharing her story of the surrogate who'd tried to keep her baby. The night she took him, she didn't use the key. We'd changed the locks after her first break-in. Instead, she used the code to our garage door, the one my mom had given her while trying to help everyone reconcile. She disabled our alarm system using the password she'd watched us enter on the hacked cameras. She was in and out in minutes, taking our 2-month-old son while we slept upstairs. The Amber Alert went out immediately. Emma's photo was everywhere, on every news channel and social media platform. But she'd planned for that too. She'd dyed her hair, wore glasses, dressed differently than her usual style. She'd even lost weight to change her appearance. The fake documents she carried were so well crafted that she made it through 2 police checkpoints without raising suspicion. What she hadn't planned for was our son's medical needs. He'd been born with an autoimmune condition that required specialized formula supplemented with my breast milk. Without it, his body couldn't process nutrients properly. Emma didn't know this. In her delusion, Joshua was a perfectly healthy baby who just needed his real mother's love. For 72 hours, I didn't sleep. I pumped milk that my baby couldn't drink, cried until I had no tears left, and prayed to every deity I could think of to bring him home safe. Mike drove through neighborhoods for hours, hoping to spot Emma's car. Lily stayed with Mike's parents, asking every day when her brother was coming home and why Aunt Emma had taken him. When the police finally found them, our son was critically ill. Emma had been trying to feed him regular formula, not understanding why he kept rejecting it, why he was losing weight so rapidly. She'd convinced herself that he was just adjusting to being with his real mother, that the distress was from missing her for so long. Even as his skin grew pale and his cries weakened, she believed love would be enough. They airlifted him to the nearest children's hospital. The doctors were honest with us. They couldn't guarantee he'd survive. His organs were shutting down from dehydration and malnutrition. Those next days in the PICU were the darkest of my life. watching my tiny baby fight for his life, hooked up to machines that breathed for him, fed him, monitored every failing system in his small body. Emma was arrested and held without bail this time. The psychiatric evaluation revealed what we already knew. She was completely delusional, but she was also competent to stand trial. She understood the charges against her, even if she believed they were unjust. She could participate in her own defense, even if that defense was based on a false reality. My parents paid for her lawyer. They hired Theodore Morrison, apparently one of the best defense attorneys in the state for cases involving mental illness. When I confronted them at the hospital, my mother's response chilled me to the bone. "She's our daughter too, Sarah. We can't just abandon her. Maybe if you'd been more understanding, more willing to share, none of this would have happened." Share. As if my baby was a toy Emma and I were fighting over in the sandbox. The trial preparation was exhausting. We had to relive every moment, provide evidence of every violation, every escalation. Mike documented everything obsessively, creating folders of screenshots, recordings, medical records. We hired our own lawyer to help the prosecution, wanting to make sure nothing was missed. During this time, we discovered just how deep Emma's planning had gone. She'd been tracking my ovulation cycle through casual conversations and social media posts. She'd known I was trying to get pregnant and had timed her own preparation accordingly. The nursery in her apartment wasn't new. She'd been collecting items for over a year, telling people she was adopting. She'd studied interstate custody law, specifically choosing a state that would be more sympathetic to her forged documents. She'd rehearsed her story with my parents, coaching them on what to say to support her claims. She'd even planted seeds of doubt about our parenting with extended family members, casual comments about how tired we looked, how overwhelmed we seemed. Our son slowly recovered, though the doctors warned us about potential long-term effects from his ordeal. Every milestone he hit felt like a miracle. The first time he smiled after coming home from the hospital, I sobbed. When he finally reached his birth weight again, we celebrated quietly, afraid to jinx his progress. The trial itself was a media circus. Emma's supporters, people who'd believed her online story, protested outside the courthouse. They held signs calling us baby stealers, chanting for justice for a grieving mother. Some of them tried to approach us, screaming that we destroyed a family for our own selfish desires. Inside the courtroom, Emma played her part perfectly. She appeared fragile, broken, a mother separated from her child. She cried at all the right moments, spoke about Joshua with such genuine love that even I almost believed her pain was real, because in a way, it was. In her mind, she'd lost her child twice, first to violence and then to us. My testimony was brutal. Theodore Morrison painted me as a jealous sister who'd always resented Emma's beauty, her success, her happiness. He suggested I'd gotten pregnant deliberately to hurt her, to flaunt what she'd lost. He twisted every boundary I'd tried to set as cruelty, every attempt to protect my family as selfishness. But the evidence was overwhelming. The months of planning, the forged documents, the stalking, the kidnapping. The medical testimony about our son's near-death experience was damning. Even Theodore Morrison couldn't spin that into something sympathetic. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. Emma's reaction was volcanic. She screamed that we'd stolen her baby, that Joshua would never know his real mother, that prison walls couldn't keep a mother from her child. As they dragged her from the courtroom, she locked eyes with me and said, "He'll always be Joshua. He'll always be mine. And one day, he'll know the truth." She was sentenced to 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. It wasn't enough, not for what she'd put us through, but it was something. We could breathe. We could start healing. We could raise our children without looking over our shoulders. We moved across the country within a month of the trial ending. We told no one where we were going, not even Mike's family, until we were settled. We changed our phone numbers, deleted our social media accounts, started fresh in a place where no one knew our story. Lily started at a new school, where she was just a normal kid. not the girl whose aunt tried to steal her brother. But trauma doesn't just disappear with distance. I still check the locks obsessively. I still panic if the baby monitor is too quiet for too long. Lily still asks sometimes if Aunt Emma will come back, if she'll try to take her brother again. We've all been in therapy, trying to process what happened, trying to build a new normal. My parents tried to sue for grandparents' rights 6 months after we moved. They claimed we'd alienated them unfairly, that they deserved to know their grandchildren. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd helped Emma try to steal our son, and now they wanted legal access to him. We fought it and won, but it was another wound on top of everything else. Sometimes I dream about the sister I used to have, the one who braided my hair before school and snuck me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking, the one who held my hand during our grandmother's funeral and promised we'd always have each other. That Emma died the night she lost Joshua, and what remained was someone I couldn't save, no matter how much I wanted to. Our son is 3 now. His name is not Joshua, though I won't share his real name here to protect his privacy. He's healthy, happy, meeting all his milestones. He has Mike's eyes and my stubbornness. He loves trains and hates broccoli and gives the best hugs in the world. Lily is an amazing big sister, protective and loving in equal measure. We've built a good life in our new city. We have friends who don't know our past, who just see us as the nice family from the park playdate group. Mike found a job he loves. I work from home, still needing to be close to the kids. We're thinking about trying for another baby, though the thought terrifies me as much as it excites me. Emma has tried to contact us from prison. The letters get forwarded through our lawyer who screens them for threats. They're always about Joshua, about how he needs his real mother, about how she's planning for when they're reunited. She's created an entire fantasy life for him in her mind. First days of school she'll miss, birthdays she's celebrating alone, milestones she imagines in her cell. My parents write too, less frequently. They're living with the consequences of their choices, ostracized by most of the extended family once the full truth came out. They still visit Emma, still support her delusions from what I've heard. They've never once acknowledged what they helped her do to us, to our son, to our family. I share this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. The people who can hurt us most are often those we trust most. The red flags we ignore because of love and loyalty can lead to unimaginable consequences. If someone you love is showing signs of delusion, of obsession, of inability to accept reality, please don't enable them. Get them help. Set boundaries. Protect yourself and your family. Because love isn't always enough. Sometimes love becomes possession, obsession, destruction. Sometimes the person you're trying to save will drag you down with them. And sometimes the only way to survive is to let go, to run, to save yourself and those you're responsible for. My son is playing with his trains now, making happy choo-choo sounds while his sister builds him a track. They're safe. They're loved. They're ours, and no delusion, no matter how powerful, can change that reality. But I still double-check the locks every night, just to be sure.